Hey guys, tonight we begin with the sad, strange and sometimes downright dangerous life of a man whose job was to make everyone else laugh. The medieval court jester, the floppy hat, the bells, the jokes. It all sounds like fun and games until you realise you were one wrong joke away from the dungeon. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. So you want to be a court jester? Too bad. No one wants to be a jester. It's not something you train for. It's something that happens to you, like the plague, or being born left-handed in a world of swords. Most jesters didn't start out dreaming of juggling turnips in front of moody aristocrats. They were often chosen not for their ambition or resume, but because of something unique about them. You might have had a limp, a hunchback, or a high-pitched voice. Maybe you were unusually clever, unusually weird, or unusually short. Either way, someone important pointed and said, "That one, he's funny, let's keep him." Congratulations, your personality has been conscripted. Sometimes it started with a single joke. You made a noble laugh once at a feast, probably by accident. You slipped in the mud or mocked a rival baron just loud enough to be heard. The next morning, you're not back in your peasant hut. You're in the castle being handed a hat with bells and a new job description. Be entertaining forever. Other times you were purchased. Yes, bought. Lords sometimes collected jesters, like they collected exotic animals or oversized goblets. If you were especially witty or weird-looking, you might get gifted from one court to another like a party favour wrapped in sarcasm. You didn't apply to be a jester. You got chosen the way a chicken gets chosen for the stew pot, suddenly and without consultation. And from that moment on, your life was no longer your own. You were the designated laugh dispenser, dragged out during feasts, summoned during tense political meetings, and paraded like a mascot when foreign diplomats came calling. You couldn't say no. You couldn't walk away. Not unless you wanted to return to the farm or, worse, get mistaken for a vagrant and end up in the stocks. Because in the medieval world, a man without a job, land or purpose was just asking to be arrested for existing. So, yes, in theory you're an entertainer, but in reality you're a high-pressure, low-pay, full-time joke machine kept on retainer by people who can have you whipped for bad timing. And that's just how the audition worked. You may not be on stage with the spotlight, but make no mistake. In the medieval court, you're always performing. Being a jester isn't a job you clock into, it's your existence. You eat, sleep, and breathe among nobles, but you're never really one of them. You're their entertainment, their curiosity, their living what-if scenario. The court's emotional support oddity. You're not allowed to be invisible. Everyone sees you, and they expect something the moment they do. A joke, a twirl, a clever insult at someone else's expense. You are, in essence, the world's most exhausted novelty act. Forever one smirk away from being called boring. Even when you're not officially summoned to perform, you're still being watched. Walking through the Great Hall, better strut, passing the Queen's table at supper, better to wink or curtsy ironically than to sit alone in the corner for 5 seconds. Someone will say, "Why isn't the fool being foolish?" And heaven forbid you show a real human emotion. Sadness that makes people uncomfortable. Anger is dangerous. Quiet reflection. Suspicious. If you're not grinning like an idiot while half dancing on one foot, they assume you're planning treason. Worse still, you live in the palace, but not like a prince. You sleep somewhere near the kitchens or tucked into a spare closet that used to house brooms. Your quarters are just close enough to hear all the laughter but never be included in it. You eat what's left over. You wear what's given. You exist as a fixture of fun, not a person. And if someone important is bored or irritable, guess who gets summoned to fix it? You. If a nobleman's hunting party failed, if the wine cellar ran dry, or if the king's favourite dog coughed weirdly, someone is coming to knock on your door at midnight to do something amusing. You're not allowed to be. You're only allowed to entertain, which means the line between your true self and your persona gets so blurry you forget who you were before the bells and jokes and forced smiles. In the medieval court, you don't just wear the costume, you are the costume. And trust me, the show never ends. Being a jester sounds fun until you realise you're required to be funny constantly. You don't get to be off, you don't get quiet days, you don't get to have moods. Your entire identity is expected to be one endless laugh track, no matter what else is going on in the world or your own life. Your job description is hilarious on demand. Even if the Duke just buried his third wife, even if the kingdom is at war, even if you woke up with a toothache and crushed morale, it doesn't matter. You're still expected to juggle, tell a pun, or fall flat on your face with grace. No pressure, right? And don't even think about reusing jokes. These are nobles, after all. They want fresh entertainment, that witty poem you worked on for a week. Great. Now do 12 more before lunch, and while you're at it, impersonate 3 courtiers. Write a satire of the bishop's sermon and pretend to trip on a goose. Now if you bomb, you're not just getting a bad Yelp review, you're getting jerked, slapped, possibly pelted with chicken bones, or worse, replaced. Medieval courts didn't have HR departments. If you fail to amuse the wrong person on the wrong day, your next gig might involve cleaning chamber pots or digging your own grave. And remember, you're the only one in the room not allowed to be serious. Everyone else can cry, rage, pray, scheme, or fall apart. You juggle through the tension. You laugh through royal tantrums. You dance around political intrigue with a stupid hat on your head and a forced smile on your face. And you can't say, "I'm not feeling it today." Feelings are irrelevant. Your entire value depends on how many chuckles you can wring from people who think sarcasm is foreplay and cruelty is wit. So, yes, being the funny one sounds great in theory. But when your survival depends on your ability to entertain people who could legally execute you for a bad punchline, it's less stand-up comedy and more medieval emotional hostage-taking. In a medieval court, the line between funny and offensive is razor thin, and you're expected to tiptoe across it blindfolded, juggling insults. As a jester, your job is to mock, tease, and comment on everything. Kings, queens, clergy, guests, but never too harshly, never too directly, and never at the wrong moment. One misplaced quip about the king's expanding waistline or the lord's 4th marriage, and suddenly you're not the funny man. You're the fool who crossed a line, and here's the real kicker. That line moves. On Monday, the Queen laughs when you joke about her cousin's gambling habits. On Tuesday, he's in the room and now it's treason. On Wednesday, she laughs again, but too hard, and the king looks displeased. On Thursday, you're being escorted out by guards for disturbing the peace of courtly decorum. There's no safe zone. Not really. Jokes about politics, risky religion, suicide, physical appearances, dangerous things, and royal failures. Absolutely not, unless you wrap it in 3 layers of metaphor and a juggling routine. Even then, maybe don't. Some Jesters developed an art of truth through absurdity, couching social criticism in riddles, double meanings and animal metaphors. The rooster with the sharp tongue and no eggs might want to crow less in the morning, you say, hoping the king laughs instead of ordering your execution. But it's a gamble always. If the noble you mock is in a bad mood, that's your neck. If the bishop thinks your joke implies he's greedy, that's blasphemy. If the court turns against you, the same people who once roared with laughter will suddenly clutch their pearls and pretend they never found you amusing. And don't expect anyone to defend you. The jester isn't protected. You're not clergy. You're not nobility. You're a fool with a license to speak. A license that can be revoked with a single glare. Some jesters were whipped, some were banished, some were hanged, others were retired, which in medieval terms often meant buried without a funeral. So yes, humour was your weapon, but it was also your noose. And in court, timing was everything. Miss the beat, lose your head. And before you even speak, the room is already laughing at what you're wearing. As a medieval jester, your wardrobe isn't made for dignity. It's made to humiliate. The moment you step into court, your entire outfit screams one thing. I'm not a person, I'm a punchline. Let's start with the hat, the famous coxcomb, a multicoloured, flopping, horned monstrosity with bells attached to the tips. Bells. Not because it helps with your performance, but because people want to hear you coming like a walking wind chime of low self-worth. Your tunic, a checkerboard of clashing colours. No sane tailor would combine on purpose. Yellow and blue, red and green, bright garish patches sewn together like a tapestry made by someone who hates your dignity. Your shoes, curled toe slippers, also with bells. Perfect for slipping on spilled milk or tripping over your own relevance. They make you look like a court-approved goblin, which frankly is the point. Even your belt is a joke, often oversized or knotted in ways that prevent practicality. Need to carry a knife or pouch? Forget it. That's not what you're here for. You're here to jiggle, dance, and fall on your face in a glorified mascot uniform. And while nobles wear velvet, silk, fur, and gold thread embroidery, your clothes are made from the cheapest scraps of wool and linen. If it's itchy, heavy, or stained, perfect. The worse it feels, the better it looks. The audience must always remember you're beneath them. Now imagine wearing this to every feast, every wedding, and every royal negotiation. There's no variation, no wardrobe change, and no formal gesture wear. You are visually ridiculous 24/7. Even when you're dead serious, you look like a colouring book exploded on your body. And don't expect compliments. People don't say, "Nice hat." They say, "Try not to trip over your bells today, fool." Or worse, they tug your sleeve just to hear you jingle like a holiday decoration with abandonment issues. So, yes, your clothes might be iconic, but they're also a uniform of humiliation. A reminder that even when your words are sharp, your outfit must be dull-witted enough to reassure the powerful that you're never truly a threat, just an echo in a funny hat. You sleep under the same roof as dukes, baronesses, and kings. But make no mistake, you're not one of them. You're part of the furniture, like a tapestry that makes noise. Your room, if you're lucky enough to have one, is a glorified storage closet tucked behind the kitchens or near the servants' quarters. A space just far enough to remind you you're not important, and just close enough to be dragged out at a moment's notice for a midnight joke or awkward wedding toast. At meals, you don't sit with the nobles, you stand near them, close enough to overhear gossip, be insulted mid-bite, or have a piece of chicken flung at your head instead. You might be allowed to eat from the same platters, but always last after the nobles, the priests, the dog, and occasionally the stable boy. And yet you hear everything, affairs, plots, murmured insults, and the truth behind marriages and treaties. You are the unwanted ear in the room, the one nobody stops talking around because in their minds you're too lowly to matter. You're harmless, a fool. But that doesn't stop you from knowing everything, and sometimes that knowledge keeps you alive or gets you killed. The irony is cruel. You live among nobility, you know their secrets, you share their meals, but socially you're stranded. The nobles won't befriend you, the servants won't trust you, you're too high for one world, too low for the other. Your presence is tolerated but not respected. You're allowed into spaces peasants never see, but only so long as you're amusing. You're patted on the head like a performing animal, not welcomed like a guest. If you speak too plainly or ask for something real, a favour, protection or respect, you're reminded immediately. Know your place, fool. You're quite literally a resident outsider. You can mimic the court, mock the lords and entertain the ladies, but you'll never inherit land, marry into nobility or wear a sword for honour. Your future is as fixed as your bells. So yes, you live with the nobles, but you live among them the way a shadow lives among light. Always present, never truly visible. You've spent years honing your skills, juggling knives, reciting witty verse, playing instruments, mimicking voices and composing satire that could rival Cicero. And yet, no one thinks of you as talented. They think of you as amusing. That's the curse of being a jester. No matter how much skill, creativity or performance mastery you have, your genius is constantly treated like a party trick. You compose clever rhymes in multiple languages. They'll chuckle and say, "Do the funny face again." You craft a biting piece of political satire disguised as a joke about sheep. Someone throws a grape at your head and tells you not to get too clever. You're expected to be brilliant but never acknowledged as such. If a noble sings a song, everyone applauds. If you sing better, the room goes silent. If a baron tells a joke, it's praised for its boldness. If you tell the same joke better, it's called sassy or inappropriate. And woe unto you if you actually outshine someone important. Nobles don't like being upstaged, especially by someone dressed like a Christmas ornament. You're supposed to sparkle, not eclipse, so you play a strange game, perform just well enough to keep your job, but not so well that you make anyone feel inferior. Be witty, but not wise. Be sharp, but not threatening. Be brilliant. And then immediately juggle something to remind everyone you're not that clever. It's a balancing act on the edge of a sword. And here's the real tragedy. Many jesters were incredibly skilled. Musicians, acrobats, poets, and political thinkers all hide behind a mask of idiocy, because brilliance in a fool's mouth is only tolerated if it comes with a pratfall and a jingle. You know what's worse? They laugh hardest when you mess up. Miss a joke, trip mid-dance, or drop a lute. That's when they roar. Not because you meant to, but because failure reinforces what they want to believe. That you're just an idiot in a loud outfit, not someone clever enough to mock them in their own tongue. So yes, your talent may be the most refined in the room, but your applause, it only ever comes wrapped in condescension. Feasts in a medieval court are grand. Glistening roasts, overflowing wine goblets, minstrels plucking away in the background. It's a festival of excess, and you're the main cause of humiliation. From the moment guests arrive, nobles are eyeing you like a toy they can poke for laughs. Do a trick, fool. Tell a joke. Imitate Lord Wensley and his lazy eye. You perform not because you want to, but because the mood of 100 powerful drunken nobles depends on your ability to not take offence while being publicly mocked, grabbed, teased, and possibly slapped. You don't sit at the table. You orbit it like a bright, jingly satellite of shame. You move from group to group like a courtly room, cleaning up awkward silences with a clever line or a badly timed handstand. You are always available but never invited. And when the wine starts flowing heavily, that's when things turn. Suddenly, your performance becomes a game for everyone else. Someone pulls your hat down over your eyes. Another demands a pig impression. Someone else throws a leg bone at you and laughs when you flinch. Because here's the thing, you're not just entertainment. You're a social punching bag, a safety valve for the elite. Nobles can't insult each other, but they can insult you, and they do constantly. They mock your clothes, your voice, your background, and your worth. Not because they hate you, but because you're convenient. Because laughing at the jester makes everyone feel smarter, richer, and safer. You're the joke that keeps the system in balance. You smile. You take it. You keep the laughter going because the alternative is silence. And in the medieval court, silence is dangerous. Silence means tension. Silence means attention shifts. And you do not want the spotlight to land on someone more important than you and find you unfunny in the process. So yes, you're at every feast, but you're not celebrated. You're consumed like the bread and wine, swallowed and forgotten by the time the goblets are cleared. And when everyone goes to bed full and satisfied, you go back to your closet-sized room with bruised ribs and a sore smile. By day, you're a jester, flinging jokes, juggling apples, and taking verbal punches like a trained clown in a velvet cage. But by night, you're a weapon. The clown might laugh at your tumbling act, but they know your real value isn't in your slapstick. It's in your ears. You see, being a fool comes with a strange perk. You're invisible in plain sight. Nobles speak freely around you. Servants forget you're there. Guests vent their frustrations while you pour their wine. You drift from corner to corner like furniture with feet, catching everything. You hear confessions that weren't meant to be heard. Treason whispered between cousins. Affairs confessed over goblets, bribes, threats, and alliances forming in the shade of the feast. And you remember it all, not because you're nosy, but because it keeps you alive. Because sometimes the king calls you aside. He says, "Fool, tell me what the bishop said to the French envoy last night, and you'd better have the answer. If you don't, he might think you're loyal to someone else. If you do, he might ask for more." This is the terrible dance. The king wants truth from your lips, but no truth that implicates him. You serve a monarch who praises your honesty until your honesty offends. You're expected to report quietly, cleverly, maybe even in riddle form, who's sleeping with whose wife, or who's plotting a little light rebellion over stew. You're the court's most dangerous informant, disguised as the least dangerous person in the room. But there's a catch. Everyone else knows it. The lords and ladies smile at you, but they don't trust you. Servants stop talking when you walk by. The guards eye you like you're holding a dagger behind your back. And in a way, you are. Your weapon is information. And information in a medieval court is just a sharp joke away from being deadly. So you're always listening, always choosing which truth to tell and which one to bury under a harmless punchline. Because in a world full of swords and secrets, the most dangerous blade isn't forged from steel. It's tucked behind a fool's grin. In the medieval court, your job is to keep everyone else laughing, even when you're falling apart inside. Your dog died. Doesn't matter. The Queen still expects you to make a joke about her cousin's wig. You've got a fever. Too bad. The Duke had a bad hunting day, and he needs a laugh before he throws his plate. Your heart's broken. Keep dancing, fool. This is a wedding. You're not allowed to have feelings unless they're funny ones. Sadness, that's selfish. Anger, insubordination, fatigue, laziness, anything short of cheerful absurdity is treated like a betrayal. If you show real emotion, people get uncomfortable. Not because they care, but because you're failing your function. They don't see you as a person with a soul and scars. They see you as court furniture with jokes. You're expected to absorb everyone else's moods and reflect none of your own. You must sit through drunken tirades, mocking laughter, passive-aggressive insults, and the occasional flying chicken leg and smile through it all. Sometimes you perform while grieving. Sometimes you perform while ill. Sometimes you perform while quietly begging the universe to just let you disappear behind a curtain and cry for 5 blessed minutes. But there's no curtain, no privacy. You're always on. And the idea of vulnerability doesn't fit your costume. And here's the cruelest twist. When nobles do notice you're down, they don't ask what's wrong. They say, "Why aren't you being funny today?" Or worse, "Maybe the fool's finally lost it. Shall we find a new one?" So what do? You turn your pain into performance. You make your heartbreak a punchline. You laugh first and louder before they can. You build a fortress of wit around your exhaustion, and you don't let anyone see inside, because the moment they do, they realise the fool is human. The illusion shatters, and so does your job. So yes, you had feelings. You just learned to bury them under bells and jokes like everyone expected. Because in the court, when everyone else gets to feel things, the fool is the one who pretends nothing hurts. Medieval kings were not known for emotional stability. One bad dream, one spoiled roast, and one poorly timed sneeze from a foreign diplomat, and the entire mood of the court shifts like a thundercloud with a crown. And guess who they all look at when the king furrows his brow or frowns into his goblet? You. Because if the monarch isn't smiling, clearly the fool isn't doing his job. It doesn't matter that you were up late performing at a feast, or that your voice is hoarse from singing, or that you told 12 jokes this morning that got genuine chuckles from 3 knights and a cook. If the king wakes up irritable, the court looks at you like you personally ruined breakfast. You're not just the jester. You're the court's emotional insurance policy. Did a trade negotiation fail? The king's advisors mutter. Perhaps the fool didn't lighten the tension enough. Did the queen scowl during mass? Maybe the jester made a joke in poor taste. Did the king stub his toe on a chamber pot? Has the fool been leaving thing about again? Sometimes it's subtle, a snide comment, a disapproving glare. Other times it's direct. Entertain me, fool. I'm in a foul mood, and your head's in the balance. And they're not kidding. You're one ill-timed silence away from being demoted to stable cleaner or worse, executed for being unfunny. And even when it's not your fault, it becomes your burden. You must fix the mood, patch the tension, and make the royal toddler laugh so no one notices the king just broke a goblet over the steward's head. You become a human emotional thermostat, adjusting yourself endlessly so everyone else stays warm and content. But here's the thing, no one ever thanks you. If the king's mood improves, it's because his wine was strong. If he laughs, it's because someone told him a joke earlier, not you. If he doesn't laugh, you're at fault. Either way, you lose. So yes, in a court of paranoia and politics, you, the jester, are somehow both irrelevant and responsible for the mood of the most powerful man in the kingdom. And if he doesn't laugh, you'd better start praying. You may live in the castle, wear bells on your hat, and share jokes with kings. But make no mistake, you're not free. In fact, you're more trapped than most. Because being a medieval court jester isn't just a job, it's an identity that consumes you. Once you're labelled the fool, that's it. There's no promotion, no career change, and no, I'd like to try something different. You're a lifelong performer whether you want to be or not. It doesn't matter if you're aging, tired or sick. You don't get to retire. There's no pension, no cosy cottage waiting at the edge of the kingdom. You don't become a merchant or a monk or a respected elder. You're not master, whatever your name was. You're still the fool, just slower, sadder, and with fewer teeth. And the worst part is, even if you're brilliant, no one will ever see past the hat. You might write poetry, you might speak 4 languages, you might secretly know more about statecraft than the royal council. But when you speak, everyone hears bells and expects Pratt to fall. You could warn of the war and be ignored, but if you slip on a turnip, they'll laugh for hours. You've become a costume with a voice. And try leaving. Good luck. You're not trained in a trade. You own no land. You have no connections outside the castle walls. If you wander into a town, you're not seen as that sharp-witted court performer. You're just a strange, poorly dressed man babbling about dukes and drama, probably mistaken for a madman or vagrant. And if you do leave and somehow survive, what then? You'll miss meals, you'll be forgotten, and sooner or later some lesser noble will say, "Bring back the old fool, he made us laugh," and just like that you're dragged back in because you're not a man. You're an object that people remember when they're bored. So you stay, you perform, you laugh at your own pain because the alternative is terrifying. Because once you're the fool, you stay the fool forever. Here's the strange thing about being a fool. In a room full of nobles, bishops and knights, you might be the only one allowed to speak the truth. Everyone else in court speaks in riddles. Diplomats flatter, courtiers scheme, servants lie to survive. But you've got one strange, dangerous privilege. You can say what others can't. You can mock a policy the king refuses to reconsider. You can whisper jokes that call out corruption. You can impersonate the baron, who's clearly embezzling grain, or the duchess with a suspiciously close friendship to the bishop's nephew, and somehow get away with it. But let's be clear, getting away with it doesn't mean you're safe. It means you're walking a high wire strung between comedy and execution. The court laughs because they're pretending it's just a joke. But you know the truth. It's never just a joke. That jest about the war, that's a political opinion in disguise. That pun about the taxes, that's public dissent delicately wrapped in wordplay. You're the only honest voice in the room and everyone knows it. And that scares them. Some will admire you quietly, others will hate you openly, but all will watch your every word because one misstep, one joke too sharp, one truth too close, and the same crown that once chuckled at your cleverness may have your head rolling across the tiles by morning. In a world where saying the wrong thing could get anyone imprisoned, the Jester was the court's built-in truth serum, but with no protection. You are the moral mirror, the court's conscience in bells. You're allowed to point at the naked emperor so long as you do it with a backflip and a silly voice. But if your truth cuts too deep, or if the king is in a particularly fragile mood, well, jesters have been silenced before. So yes, in a court built on secrets, your job is to shine a flickering lantern into the shadows and pretend it's a spotlight gag. Because sometimes the only one brave enough to speak the truth is the man everyone refuses to take seriously. You spend your life surrounded by people, nobles, knights, ladies, and guests. You entertain at feasts, weddings, coronations, and even funerals. Your voice echoes in great halls. Your jokes fill chambers with laughter. And yet, when your time comes, no one is there. The jester's life is filled with noise, but his death is usually silent. You die in a corner room unnoticed, unmourned. No parade, no eulogy, no marble slab etched with your cleverest line. You don't get remembered like a knight or a bard. You're not written into songs or family histories. You're just gone. Maybe the cook mentions you years later. Remember that fool who used to dance like a goat? Maybe a new jester finds your old bells in a drawer and doesn't ask whose they were. Or maybe no one remembers you at all, because someone else took your place before your bed even went cold because you weren't a person to them. Not really. You were a sound, a colour, a flicker of amusement, replaceable, disposable. And the very thing that made you valuable, your ability to disappear behind a joke, is the same thing that ensures you're forgotten. You never marry. You never have heirs. You never own land or build a name. You make everyone else feel important, but you leave no legacy of your own. Even your closest friend in court, the steward who once laughed at your imitation of the bishop, won't visit your grave. You might be buried outside the churchyard because fools weren't considered holy enough for consecrated ground. Too many jokes, not enough prayers. You lived for their laughter. You measured your worth in their joy. But laughter is fleeting. It echoes once and fades. And when you're gone, the halls grow quiet until the next fool arrives, juggling for applause. So yes, your life brought others cheer. You made kings forget their worries and lords drop their pride. But when your candle finally burns out, there's no crowd, no fanfare, just silence. And maybe, just maybe, the soft jingle of bells remembered by no one. To the lords and ladies of the medieval court, the jester was entertainment, comic relief in a tense world of politics, war and ceremony. But look closer, and you'll see the jester wasn't just there to amuse, he was there to remind. He was a walking contradiction, low-born yet allowed to mock kings, powerless yet speaking truth to power, ridiculed yet feared. He stood at the centre of the feast, jingling and spinning, not to be celebrated but to be studied, because the jester was a mirror. His jokes revealed things no one else dared to say. His puns disguised political commentary. His mimicry revealed hypocrisy, and every time he made the room laugh, he also made it squirm. Because somewhere in the slapstick there was always a sliver of truth. The fool was safe to laugh at until he wasn't, until he pointed out too much, until the room realised this man in bells and rags understands us better than we'd like. And so he became more than a performer. He became a symbol, a reminder that power is fragile. That truth, even dressed in comedy, can be dangerous. That laughter is a weapon. one that can cut deeper than any sword. In a world obsessed with order and hierarchy, the Jester was the exception, and that's what made him so necessary. He walked the halls of power not because he was respected, but because he reminded the powerful of what they feared most: being ridiculous, being exposed, being human. But the joke in the end was never truly on the nobles, it was on him. He sacrificed dignity, freedom, legacy, and peace of mind for the fleeting approval of people who would never see him as an equal. His genius was hidden beneath absurdity, his wisdom wrapped in wordplay, his truth dismissed as foolishness. And yet, centuries later, we still remember him, not as a clown, but as something more complex, more haunting, more real. The medieval jester was not a joke. He was a warning that sometimes the only one telling the truth is the one you're busy laughing at. Long before curtains rose and actors bowed, ancient theatre was born in a swirl of wine, masks, and divine chaos. It didn't start with playwrights or applause. It began with Dionysus, the Greek god of wine, fertility, ritual madness, and performance. In 6th century BCE Athens, theatre wasn't just culture, it was a cult. The earliest dramas emerged during the city Dionysia, a spring festival honouring the god himself. Citizens flooded the city in celebration. Livestock was sacrificed. Wine flowed like rivers. And in the midst of this rivalry, something miraculous happened. People started acting, not pretending, but becoming, taking on voices not their own, dancing in frenzied circles and chanting choruses that blurred the line between prayer and performance. The centerpiece, a dithyramb, is a wild hymn-like chant performed by a chorus of up to 50 men, moving in rhythm, faces masked, eyes aflame with ecstasy. These weren't actors as we know them. They were vessels, mediums, each voice a drop in the divine pool of Dionysian energy. Then came a man named Thespis. Legend says Thespis stepped out from the chorus around 534 BCE and spoke as a character rather than as part of a group. Just like that, the concept of an actor was born. That's why we still call performers thespians today. Imagine it. One man alone on stage claiming to be someone else. It must have felt like blasphemy or magic. The Greeks were hooked. What began as a sacred ritual started evolving into a structured performance. Playwrights like Aeschylus and Sophocles would soon refine it further, adding a second and third actor and introducing dialogue, plot, and the idea of dramatic conflict. But the spiritual core never left. These early performances took place in massive open-air theatres carved into hillsides, most famously the Theatre of Dionysus in Athens. It could hold up to 17,000 spectators, all gathered in a semicircle to witness something that straddled religion, art and civic duty. So no, theatre didn't start in silence. It arrived loud, masked, drenched in wine and fueled by gods. The stage wasn't just a place to pretend, it was a portal to myth, madness and meaning, and it all started with the need to celebrate something bigger than ourselves. Welcome to the stage. As Greek theatre matured, it became more than divine devotion. It became a mirror through which Athenians could see their own fears, failures and fleeting glories reflected under the Mediterranean sun. But to truly understand that mirror, we have to talk about two things: tragedy and masks. Tragedy, or tragoidia, literally goat song, is a word that still echoes in modern storytelling. But its origins are hazy and strange. It might refer to goats sacrificed to Dionysus, or perhaps the prize, a goat awarded to the best performer. Either way, by the 5th century BCE, tragedy had crystallized into a formal art. The plays were structured, poetic, and overwhelmingly fatal. Think fate, betrayal, vengeance, hubris, and gods who toyed with mortals like cats play with mice, and at the centre of it all were masks. Greek actors didn't just play roles, they transformed. Each actor, typically male, could portray multiple characters using distinct masks: a twisted mouth for sorrow, a wide-eyed face of fear, and a delicate, feminine mask for goddesses and queens. These masks weren't subtle, they were oversized, stylized, and often exaggerated. So even the person in the worst seat at the top of the amphitheatre could feel the character's emotion. Behind the mask, the actor's voice was everything. Projection and clarity mattered more than naturalism. With no microphones or lighting, actors had to command a sea of thousands using nothing but breath, tone, and precise physicality. One actor might kneel in grief, another might howl into the sky, all of it unfolding beneath the open heavens. Tragedians like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides revolutionized the form. Aeschylus added a second actor, Sophocles a third, and Euripides brought psychological depth and raw emotion that made his characters bleed on the page. They tackled themes of divine injustice, war trauma, and the limits of human reason. Oedipus, Antigone, Medea. These weren't just plays, they were philosophical battlegrounds. And yet, despite all this darkness, Greek theatre wasn't a funeral. It was a civic celebration. Tragedies were performed competitively, like Olympic Games for the soul. The entire city would attend, including the poor. Wealthy citizens even paid for the production as a form of public service. The stage had become sacred ground, and the mask, a tool of revelation. The Greeks had found a way to stare into chaos and call it art. While tragedy grappled with gods and doom, Greek comedy pulled down its tunic and mooned the universe. By the late 5th century BCE, as Athens blossomed into a cultural and intellectual superpower, comedy emerged as its rebellious younger sibling. It was raw, irreverent, and loud. A theatrical playground where no one, not even the gods, was safe from ridicule. If tragedy asked, "What is the meaning of suffering?" comedy asked, "Why is Zeus such a pompous idiot?" The master of this art was Aristophanes, the Shakespeare of satire. His plays, like Lysistrata, The Clouds, and The Frogs, were brilliant, bawdy, and biting. Lysistrata, for example, tells of women who withhold sex to force their men to stop waging war. It was revolutionary, hilarious, and politically loaded. Imagine watching a play where the characters are making fun of your government, your neighbours, and your own bad habits, and everyone's laughing in the open. Comedy plays were still part of religious festivals like the city Dionysia, often performed right after the tragic trilogies. The audience would go from crying over Antigone to roaring with laughter as a chorus of dancing sausages mocked corrupt politicians. Masks in comedy were even more exaggerated than those in tragedy. Grotesque faces with bulging eyes, snub noses, and enormous male appendages to guarantee laughter even from the back row. Costumes were padded, wigs were wild, and the chorus might show up as frogs, wasps, birds, or clouds, depending on the joke. But Greek comedy wasn't all slapstick. It was deeply political. Aristophanes attacked wrongdoers, philosophers, and playwrights with surgical precision. The Clouds mocked Socrates so ruthlessly that some scholars believe it contributed to the public mistrust that eventually led to his trial. As the classical age matured, comedy evolved. New comedy in the 4th century BCE softened the satire and focused on domestic plots, mistaken identities, romantic entanglements, clever slaves outwitting dim-witted masters. Players like Mandander laid the groundwork for what would later influence Roman comedies and even modern sitcoms. Greek comedy was more than laughter. It was truth-telling in disguise. A democratic city speaking to itself in riddles and punchlines, masks and music, dance and defiance. Where tragedy asked, "What is fate?" comedy replied, "Isn't it ridiculous how we try to control it?" When the Romans inherited the stage from the Greeks, they didn't whisper tragedy into the wind. They built colossal amphitheatres, stuffed them with thousands of spectators, and said, "Let's make it louder." Theatre in ancient Rome was never just about art. It was about power, performance, and pleasing the masses. The earliest Roman plays were translations of Greek works adapted by playwrights like Livius Andronicus and Plautus, who Romanised the humour, dialed up the physical gags, and simplified the plots for wider appeal.